All right, welcome back, everyone. This is now episode 4 of Project Gratis as two friends go from zero all the way to a $50 million app sale. I am Jack, and this is Sam. If you didn't catch last week's video, feel free to catch up. I went into depth about the different tech stacks that we're doing, or the different AI tech stacks that we're using is utilizing ChatGPT along with Codex and VS Code and integrating all them together and how they can flow together to actually expedite the code that you actually use inside of your app. And it helped us to build out multiple features and multiple tabs on our app without me actually having any experience on how software engineering works. I was also able to build out different edge functions using Supabase, which is our database. Now, today's video is going to be talking more about different AI models and how Sam has been able to utilize AI to actually build out the models in the background. That's kind of what we've been working on this past week. So, Sam, you can take it away now.
Yeah. So I was just, today I was just curious how long I've been working on this. And we started this halfway through November. So it's only been 2 weeks. And we have like a pretty solid base right now. So just as a recap, my background is in software engineering and AI. So for the past 2.5 years, I've been working on large language models and generative AI more specifically. But right now, what we're working on is the NBA specifically, and for betting and how it goes in the NBA, which I feel like I've learned more the more I like now I'm watching NBA like I've never been before.
Learn by doing almost.
Exactly. So I'm seeing what's happening and I'm able to work through that. So we wanted to, be able to predict NBA games and player props with a mobile app to track picks in real time. So, this week has been interesting. As Jack said in the last video, I was traveling. So I was in New York City with my family. And the first thing I wanted to do was just set up some cron jobs. And what a cron job is basically is you don't have to do anything. It's a job that does itself at a certain time during a certain point in time. And I set that up the first night I got to Brooklyn. And then I, just let it be for the rest of the week, hung out with my family, enjoyed Thanksgiving, took my fiance around the city. And right now, I'm back in Florida. I'm working. And right now, what I'm happy to say is that I've figured out a lot of things I didn't before. So I started this project using an idea that I had, which would incorporate Assemble, which is essentially Assemble is you have a bunch of different machine learning algorithms, and you can have the Kalman filter, the hidden Markov model, the Markov chain, the ELO rating, things of that. And each one of those has its own prediction. And what Assemble does is basically says, all right, everyone gets one vote. And that one vote basically has to be agreed upon by the party, let's say the party of different AIs, for there to be an agreement reached and then a prediction made. My mistake was that I gave equal voting power to all the models because I honestly didn't know which one would work best. So I thought, why not try? And as I worked through it in the back testing that I did last week, I found that 3 specific models actually worked the best. One of them was the Pareto distribution or the Pareto model. Basically, the Pareto distribution is this weird, let's call it formula, that you can basically put into any aspect of life. So basically, imagine a normal distribution curve, that bell looking with the tails on either side. And right now, what a Pareto distribution does is it takes the right side of that graph and that normal distribution, and it looks for that tail. Basically, in everything, if you take the number of people in a given domain, you take the square root of that number, those people do 50 to 80% of the work of the rest of the people in there. I don't know how to say that right. So
Like an 80 type rule.
yeah, the 80-20 rule. So I found that interesting, and I wanted just to see if that could work in basketball. There aren't that many teams, and there aren't that many players in a given distribution, so I could see who the best was and which teams were the best, and then start using that to predict What's the bet called when you just bet who wins?
Money line.
Money line.
That's
So
another thing too. The benefit of this, of me having experience and being in sports betting for 10 years and Sam not having any experience, is that he can go blindly into this. And the aspect like what he's talking about right now makes sense. And it's the aspect of, Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic contribute to 90% of their team sports. But Sam doesn't know. I don't even know if Sam knows who these people are, and let alone how they actually contribute. And so
yeah,
that's one of the biggest benefits of having two co-founders with completely different backgrounds.
it's fun because it's actually funny. So going off on a quick tangent, what's the guy you just said with the weird name?
Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic.
Yeah, so that was actually a funny thing that I had to do today for back testing because I ran a few tests to make sure there were no data leakage. And one of the things I found is that on one of the APIs that we're calling, they have the actual accent above each letter. So it wasn't matching up with the English version of how you would write out that full name. So I had to actually put in those variables to run it. And now it's working with no data leakage. But right now, let's get back to what this week was. So before I left, I set up Railway.app. Railway.app is essentially a service that you can use to set up your own backend. It's a 24-hour service. So right now, before I left, I realized something like my computer is the linchpin. Like everything happens on my computer. And I was like, shit, for a real product, that ain't going to work. So I was like, all right, real quick, Google, ChatGPT, how can I make this not the linchpin? And they're like, Railway. I was like, never heard of it. Let's do it. So I set it up in Railway, and Railway is a nightmare and a half. It works if you understand it, and it took me some time because my method of working in code is just break shit and see what happens. Am I allowed to curse on YouTube?
Yeah, you can. You just,
right, cool.
Yeah, I think so. We'll find out.
So, one of the big things was that Railway itself kept injecting a port env variable, and don't worry about what that is. But basically, it conflicted with my configuration. So I had to explicitly ignore the Railway's port in my configuration because that configuration itself was actually sending information to the wrong database that Jack set up. So I was like, what is going on? And then I spent maybe 3 hours. I'm pretty sure I texted you I'm an idiot 20 times that day.
Yeah, every time I was driving around, I just kept getting, I'm an idiot. And I was like, oh, what happened? And then I checked back 3 letters down and it was like, oh, no, I'm actually not an idiot. And it was again, I'm like, all right. Now I don't know if you're an idiot or not. I'm just trying to play basketball and eat turkey.
But that was the fun part about learning Railway. Now I know how Railway works. And it's actually a great service. If you don't know how Railway works, it's going to take you time. I figured it out in a couple hours. My big thing is YouTube, but I was able to figure out what the issue was. And then I ran into the next issue was Superbase. And Superbase is our data warehouse. And right now we have duplicate tables for picks, plural, and pick, singular. And then we also have games, plural, and game, singular. Now, this is a problem. No, you're good. The problem is that I'm dyslexic. That's going to cause a problem. So I basically had to manually clean up what was needed. And I have a basic understanding of SQL. And there's a SQL editor in Superbase, super helpful. I can do everything from there without having to ever look at a table. But from there, the next thing I want to talk about is that today and yesterday, I started doing something that we've been talking about for maybe 2 weeks now, which is player props. And player props are really interesting because you actually take all the variables down to just one variable, which is the player itself. Now, the player can do an unlimited amount of things, but it's based off of him.
And for people at home who aren't familiar with player props, the way they work is traditional sports betting is you bet on a team, you bet them to win, you bet the spread, you can bet the total. Player props, as Sam was saying, was talking about taking a specific player and betting on them. Now, that's also the traditional way of player props is what they're called. But now oftentimes you'll see player props or how daily fantasy sports works is you're creating these fantasy lineups and they're really in conjunction with creating player props and putting them together to create your daily fantasy lineup. And that's kind of how daily fantasy gets around the legality of a traditional sportsbook. And I can post a video later about actually breaking down the whole thing of how a traditional sportsbook works against a daily fantasy app, against a prediction market, against a peer-to-peer exchange. But pretty much what Sam, again, to break it down for people who aren't familiar with sports betting, is player props are specific bets to a specific player, and those can be bet straight up one-on-one, or you can combine those into a daily fantasy app, which would be used on a Prize Picks, Underdog, Sleeper, stuff like that.
Exactly. So this is why I'm like really excited for player props, because I've passed the hard part. Basically, as of right now, the models are running. Every morning, I just run a simple curl on my terminal. I see the results. I try to see, why this, why that, and then keep moving. But the models right now are just learning. So they've already been back tested. And back testing basically is the way you back test and train is actually kind of interesting. So long story short, you give MLs a known amount of data. So let's say you want to know the data of the NBA from 2020 to 2023. You give it that. It learns everything. It takes all of that information in. And then you test it or back test on known data that you have. You can see it, but the machine itself cannot. And that's what I did last week, was basically try to figure out which ones were best for back testing and which ones or for specific bets. So now that that's done, they've been trained. I found which ones have the best odds for different types of betting. And now I've moved on to making new models for player props specifically, because the ones that I made were designed specifically for team versus team. The ones that I built yesterday are specifically designed for predicting game outcomes of players. So we have 3 right now. We have the offensive model, so the team scoring patterns. We have a defensive model, the defensive efficiency of a team, and we have the pace model, or the game tempo of possession. So one thing that I like to do, and the Jack can attest to this, is I like learning about weird stuff like advanced mathematics and physics. Those just, I don't know, I just listen to them. And one of the things that I like is, if you have a known amount of time and you know all the variables within it, like you see a game results at the end, you can actually start modeling things more and more and start using things like the hidden Markov model or the Markov chain. Look into those. They're really interesting. But basically, each model uses the last 5 games for player props, the last 10 games, and for reference, I'll be calling those L5 and L10. And then we also have a home-away split, a rest day, and back-to-back games, which Jack told me is something that we do have to put into account, because I didn't think about that, or the fact that they played multiple games within the same week against the same person.
Yeah, and this stuff like that is stuff you have to consider against different sports, right? Hockey has a big aspect of this. NBA has different back-to-back options. And the other thing too, when you start, our MVP is specifically NBA, so there's different variables in there. But when we move on to different sports, they will have these different contingencies. For example, in the NFL, playing on different terrains, right? All basketball courts are pretty much the exact same. They're all played indoors. There's no weather involved. The NFL has, they play on different types of turf. There's grass and turf. They play in different kinds of weather. They also play on different days of the week. So there's short weeks on Thursdays, there's longer weeks on, when teams play on buys, playing at different times of the day, early, noon, and night. For example, last week, the Rams were on the road, went across the country to Carolina. The spread was 10.5. Carolina was catching 10.5. I took the Carolina because, one, it's too many points in a pro game, especially when you have a West Coast team traveling and playing a game at their local time of 10 a.m. So different things like that are different variables that are very specific to different sports that you have to account when you go and extrapolate across the board.
Yeah, so that's actually really interesting, because I had no idea about that. I thought all football fields were the same.
And some play in domes as well.
I'm going to look into that. So real quick. So the first week that I actually had live data tested on the models, we had a 40% accuracy. Not great if you're losing money, if you're betting. So right now we have to push for 52.4 is like what I'm aiming for. 52.4 is my sweet spot. So as of right now, we have a 12.4% accuracy we have to increase. And that's what the next 2 weeks will be. But the player props are actually right now on my other screen. All right. Sorry about that. My wife likes to call when we're recording for some reason. So here's what's been going on. So as of right now, what I have running on one of my screens is actually the back test for player props. So all the models have been trained, and now we're going through. As of right now, it is on 28,700 of the 83,297 historical records that we have for the last 2 years. So we'll see what happens. But this is like kind of a data collection. If we don't have the data collection perfect, it's going to always have leaks. And if it has leaks, then we're going to get construed data. So today I called Jack because I was like, this is weird. The back test just came back and we had a 71% accuracy. It's like, there's no way in hell we have a 71% accuracy.
And
so then
my whole goal is if we hit 60%, we're golden. We hit 60%, we're set. He said 71. I was like, oh, we're millionaires.
Yeah. So that's why I like I was having struggles with the odds API because so here's my first attempt of doing the back test I used the game ID, but the error was that there was an invalid event ID. The problem is that one of the APIs did not match the other API. So I had to keep finagling it. And then the second attempt was the fetching of the props by date. So I don't know why the NBA does this because UTC is something that I've never known about, but for the past 2 weeks, I've hated it. UTC is based on how the game is like put into like the ESPN API is using UTC, and UTC is basically like a universal time constraint. And fixed that, figured out that problem.
For people who don't know, UTC is based on London Greenwich time. And it starts at London is 0, and then positives go towards the US, and then negatives go towards Asia, and it goes out from there. As someone who works in data in my day-to-day job, I'm very used to UTC time conversions because it's very common, especially like Sam was talking about with cron jobs, is you need to make sure what time they're actually based on, because if I've done it 1,000 times before where I set a time, I wanted to run 4 a.m. Eastern time, which I'm at, and then it actually runs at 4 a.m. UTC, which is like, I think 11 at night or so like 10 at night Eastern time or vice versa. But I'm used to it. It's one of those things where I'm used to it, but Sam is just not. And it can get very confusing when you're not used to it.
Exactly. So, the first back test was too good to be true. I trained the 4 models using the historical player stats. This featured the L5 that we spoke about, the L10, the L20, and a rolling average with a standard deviation. And then the first attempt was a win ratio of 70. I'm looking at it right now, 70.64%. This would make us a millionaire. And in software development, if something seems too good to be true, it usually is. So, I had to ask myself some serious questions. I was talking to Jack, and while I was talking to Jack, I was thinking, like, these sports books employ PhDs in statistics. How did I just beat them? And obvious answer, data leakage. So, what is the data leakage? Because this is something that people hear sometimes. I don't know if they're listening to the same podcast I am, But data leakage is using future information to predict the past. It's essentially cheating accidentally. The AI doesn't know anything other than what it's trying to do, and what it's trying to do is give you the best possible response. It doesn't have an idea of what cheating is. Some larger models like ChatGPT, Claude, Llama, they use transformers. Transformers are different, and we can get into that later because I'm thinking we're going to need a transformer for like the MLB. But that being said, I investigated the data leakage and created a verify data leakage check, and basically, it was using known data to try. It was using known data and saying that it predicted the data it already knew. That in itself is cheating. So to fix, I retrained all the models, which takes time. And right now I am running it, and it seems to be running perfectly. So fingers crossed we'll get a reasonable percentage of how much, of how accurate our models are over time. And then we just let it out and let it loose onto the actual main branch. And then that way it starts actually being able to correct itself more and more over time based off of current events. Another thing that I was just interested in was that I ran a second back test today. And I don't know if I was going to talk about it, but I might as well. And I got a 68%. Again, something else was leaking into my future data, and I figured it out. Many dates have 10 plus games within it. Like November 1st had 13 games, and I did not know that. So I was trying to figure out what if the games later in the day were using earlier games from the same day. So I actually figured that out, and that was the problem. So I had to run another test, and I have to clean up the database later tonight. But basically was able to figure that out. And as of right now, there it is.
So it pretty much has to lag over 18 hours.
Yeah. So it had to basically 33,800. So good. It has another 50,000 to go. Basically, it's now working. It's working faster than it was before, but I think that's just because it's already data that's in the data warehouse, so it's just pulling from there instead of pulling from the API and pinging it constantly. So from there, the next thing I wanted to talk about really quickly was just the verification. You always want to trust, but you need to verify, especially when you're building an AI. You want to think, I did everything right. This should work. That's not how code works. Code is check and double check, and then once you've check it a third time. After failing twice, I wasn't taking any chances. So before Jack called me for the video, I built a 9-test verification suite. Basically, a 9-test verification suite is basically you have a bunch of different tests, and it has to pass each one of those tests before you can run the back test. So this one, train models exist and use correct cutoff, worked. Prop lines are in the correct data range, worked. Same day games are excluded, worked. Historical features only use past games, worked. A bunch of things. And then all tests passed. So I'm finally was able to send off the back test. And what I'm expecting tonight, especially after 2 days of debugging, I expect to get like a 48 to 54 percent accuracy for player props. And if it's above 65, I have another problem. I'm going to be up late. But other than that, the things that I've learned this week,
I hope it's at 65.
If it's at 65, that means I have to double check everything.
Well, I'll be happy that we're hitting at a 65% rate.
Yes. So here's basically what's going to happen. If it's 60% or higher, I'm either a genius or there's a bug. Probably a bug. But if it's above 56%, then we're at a professional better level. That's what we want to give to the users of this app, is we want them to have the confidence to make bets the same way a professional bettor does. So as of right now, the lessons learned that I really just wanted to go over, data leakage is sneaky. Every experienced ML engineer makes this mistake. I had it when I was working for the military, and I'm having it now while I'm doing sports betting. Two different worlds, same problem. Date and date time handling matters. That's something I just wanted, whoever's watching this, if you're somebody who has the aspiration of building this, understand that the subtle types of differences can cause major bugs. And then from there, if the results seem too good, investigate. Run simple queries. Well, they're not simple, but they're simple to write. And test everything. You have to have a comprehensive verification of saved time. So right now in our GitHub, I have tags. Tags are basically just where I started doing some crazy stuff and where I can go back to if I need to. And also something that needs to be understood is that sports betting is hard. There's a reason books are profitable. But back testing and using artificial intelligence can help level the playing field for the people who use this. So what's next? I have to analyze the final back testing results when they come in. And if it's profitable, I'll deploy it to production and start tracking the real bets of this week. If it's not, I will continue to add features or fix bugs and try different algorithms. But as of right now, we're going to need at least 2 to 3 weeks, which I told Jack at the beginning of this week. We'll probably have a month left, and that's exactly what we need. 2 weeks of analyzing data, 1 week of fixing it, and then redeploy. So right now, the only thing that I really just want to say is that, like, if you're interested in learning how to code, if you're interested in the things I'm interested in, like math and statistics and physics, you can follow me on Twitter. I go down deep rabbit holes and enjoy taking people with me. But other than that, I don't want to take up any more time, Jack. I know it's late. So that's it for now.
Perfect. Well, thank you. That was a great breakdown. And then we will go through this week, look at different things. I think one of the things I'll talk about next week is kind of how we're designing the actual business behind it. And we can also talk about, I know Sam touched upon it earlier, about using Railways, Supabase, and then the app itself, and kind of how the architecture of the actual app will work, along with the business aspect of, what payment processor are we going to use? How are we going to host the app? Will we use affiliate marketing? What are different, avenues to grow the business and, ingest customers? And one of the big things I texted Sam the other day was, I'm in the sports betting community. I know a lot of other sports content creators that make content. And I was talking to one the other day, and I was telling him about the app and how it would work. And he was like, please let me know right away, and I will sign up for this. He was like, this is what I need. This is what I've been needed to use for a while. And I was like, great. It's like, Sam, we have one customer. Perfect. So we'll talk more about the business aspect next week. But if there's anything you guys are interested in learning about from the business, from our app, from the process, let us know. Please add in the comments, and please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with your friends so we can grow the channel and grow the business. And we will see you guys in next week's video. Peace.
See you guys.